So, part two, I was in a hospital bed in the Lister Hospital in Stevenage because I had a rash on my legs. Nobody knew what this rash was, apart from it was something to do with my kidney function. And basically, what had happened is I'd taken so much cocaine and so many bad things that my body started to shut down. I got myself in a position where my kidneys stopped working completely, which was what the rash was. It was the bad things that are taken out of your blood by the kidneys were being pushed out of my skin. It was painful and it was itchy and I felt awful. So I went to hospital. Instead of them giving me a pill and telling me to go home and patting me on the head, they put me in a hospital bed and they did lots of tests. And I remember lying in that bed, not quite sure what was happening. I wouldn't eat any of the hospital food as well because it was disgusting. So friends of mine were bringing me sandwiches and stuff because nobody quite knew what was going on. I didn't tell them that it had got to that point. I just, they were just being kind. The doctor came in the room and there were all these students with them. And I remember the doctor saying, "Do you mind if the student's here?" And I said, "It makes no difference to me. If they've got to learn, they've got to learn." And then the doctor turned around and said, "We've never seen anything this serious in this rash form before. We're not sure what this is." And he said, "So we're going to do all of the tests." So they did blood tests, so many blood tests. I had one of those taps in my hand where they literally just turned the blood flow on and off so they could take blood that they wanted, as they wanted. And then they shoved me in a tube, MRI scan, all of that. And then, long story short, the doctor came in, put the curtain round because obviously that gives you no privacy whatsoever and everyone can hear what was going on, and then told me that I had 5 days to live. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But he said, "Look, your body's shutting down, your liver's stopping function. It's why you've got a tinge of yellow. Your lungs and everything are working. Your heart's okay." Weirdly, he said, "The heart's fine, but everything else is shutting down. And I'm saying to you, you need to put your affairs in order." That's a weird place to be. And I'm not making light of it. I'm telling you that it's a weird place to be because it is. What are you supposed to do with that information? Okay, so can I go home then and process that? No, you're not allowed to leave hospital because you're sick. And I'm like, okay, so how exactly am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to put my affairs in order and what's going on? So I got on the phone and I've phoned a few people and said, I didn't tell anyone what the doctor said to me. I just didn't tell anyone because how do you have that conversation? People were visiting me and I was, just going through the motions saying, "Oh yeah, no, life's great. Yeah, I'll be out soon. We'll go out, blah, blah." And then I had to phone my dad. Now, my family at this point had been pushed away totally. There was complete deflection about all of it. I didn't tell my sisters. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't do anything. I'm sure they knew that something wasn't right, but I didn't have any contact. I smashed up my phone before I went into the hospital, so the number I had wasn't the normal number. I did phone my dad very briefly in France, tell him that I'd been told this diagnosis and could he come. So he lives in France, so he got on a plane and came over. So we'll a bit more about that in a minute. So I am sitting there looking at this rash going, okay, I've done this to myself. And then strange thing happened, right? Complete peace. Have you ever been in a situation where you've walked into, say, a church, right? You don't have to be religious, but I've done it recently. Like you walk into a church, somewhere that's sacred to somebody, a place where people have come for hundreds of years to find solace, to find peace. Well, when I had that conversation with that doctor, and then I finally started to make moves to get people that needed to come and see me, there was a feeling of peace. Finally, the pain will end, I think is what I was thinking. Don't have to live in fear anymore. I don't have to pick up the pieces of a life that is very broken. I don't have to be the person that I am right now, because that's someone I can't really look at in the mirror. And when you have that level of peace, you realize that you have finally reached acceptance. Acceptance is the last step on the cycles of life. You go through questioning, you go through anger, you go through confusion, you go through bargaining. Yeah, I didn't really have any of that. I didn't start bargaining with God or any of that rubbish. I just found peace in that diagnosis. So as my dad was walking onto the ward, I could see him. There was a big long corridor, and I saw him coming towards me. And I was putting my clothes on to go home, because it turns out I was the luckiest human being on the planet that day, in that minute. I was getting better. My body had shut down to restart. It might sound a bit odd, but basically, I'd got so sick and I was so full of chemicals that I must have downplayed it to the point where the doctors weren't listening, because that's what happened. As soon as I became clear of all the substances and they all come out of my system, things started working again. It took a while, but my kidneys now are perfectly fine. They have all the function that you need to have. My heart, as I say, is not a problem. My liver, as I don't drink and I certainly haven't taken drugs for 16 years, I am fine. I do have type 2 diabetes and I do have a sweet tooth and all of the things that go with that. But imagine that. You told your dad that you were dying and he comes in and you're getting ready to go. How would your parents react? Tell me in the comments, actually, how would your parents react to that? What would they say when they saw you getting dressed? Because basically that doctor had made a liar out of me. But he didn't know any different. He wasn't doing it out of spite. I wasn't getting dressed out of spite either. I was getting dressed because I was ready to go home. So do you know what my dad did? He said, well, that's good news then. So I best take you to lunch. So we waited to get my medication, and then we went to lunch, and there was water consumed and some food, which I hadn't had any food of any real substance for a long time. And I remember thinking, God damn, I'm hungry. And then what had been arranged by the GP was a flat, a place to be, a place to live. He'd basically told the council that I was so close to death that if I wasn't housed, they would be the cause of my death. Lo and behold, back in those days, you could still get a council flat. So that's where I ended up, number 16 Carradon Court in Seal Farm, Hertford. When I arrived there, I had nothing, no furniture. My bag of clothes, I had no bedding, no anything. I was given a whole lot of stuff by some friends of mine who were in a pub called the Two Brewers. There's a lady called Claire who used to run that, owned by Peter Joe Clark, a friend of mine. They put me up in a room for a while I was trying to get better, and I got mumps, so I ended up being sick in there too. But a long story short, I got this council flat. And this council flat had a guy in it before me who had chainsawed the walls through a sight safe out of a top floor window. Now, bearing in mind, we're on a 5th floor. Missed his neighbour by millimetres, because that would have killed them straight away, and then was firing shotguns out the window to the police. Poor man was very, very mentally unwell. I don't know where he is now. None of my business. Basically, I was given that flat. So I remember the first night I borrowed, no, I didn't. I bought a pillow and a duvet, and it was cheap as chips. And I slept on the floor. Woke up that night to the door being banged, bang, 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 with someone to put their hand over the little the viewing thing in the door, peephole. So me being me, ripped the door open and said, "What the fuck do you want?" These people were after that guy. They thought he'd come back. And when they saw it was me, they weren't very happy about it. One of them still proceeded to try and punch me in the face. So even though I was sick, was ill, my initial reaction was just to strike back. So I took him out. The other two then realised that it wasn't the guy they were looking for, it was me. And they were a little bit frightened because at that point I had a bit of a reputation. People knew who I was. And they dragged their mate away. And I shouted after, make sure you tell everyone this is not the guy before, it's me and I need to be left alone. And that clicked something. People knew who I was because I was Jim Distortion from Perfect Distortion, and the guy who did all the comparing at Rock at the Castle and talked to crowds and headlined gigs. Local famous, don't you know? I was also the one who had nothing, who was pretty wasted away because I've been in hospital for a while and I was weak. But that one conversation, that community rallied round me. What are you doing here? How come you're here? Why are you in? Why don't you look well? And all of a sudden, they're like, people were going, can I get you some shopping? Can I do something? Is your dog all right? Can we walk to Skylar? And all of a sudden, there was this little community of people around. A lot of these people have been given up on by society as well, you know. I opened my eyes to a different side of that, different side of poverty. Just because you're poor doesn't make you a bad person. Do you know that? Just because you don't come from middle class or higher end doesn't mean you don't have the capacity for kindness, because I'm telling you, they did. They looked after me for a bit until I was strong enough. I got real well, real quick. And I never touched drugs ever again. I was still drinking, but on that day that I gave up the heroin and the cocaine, I gave up cigarettes, I gave up spirits, and the only thing I would drink was cider, because cider is where the apples do grow, you know, from Somerset, where I come from originally. So that was acceptable. I now no longer drink alcohol at all because I can't be trusted, which is fair enough. So out of death came a new life, came a way of surviving, becoming stronger, becoming a human being that didn't rely on negativity. It relied on positivity. Being sober meant that I could actually look at my feelings, because sobriety isn't the end of the journey. Getting clean and sober is the beginning, because then you have to obtain peace with all of the situations that caused you to run away and take drugs in the first place. Part 3 will be the lead up to where I am now and what I do now and who I am now, because now is what matters. My past has shaped me and formed what I do and who I am, but it no longer controls what I do and who I am. Moving forward, I live in truth. There are no lies. There is no grey. I support people. I have private clients. I run groups, and I make sure people are okay as far as I can. I ain't no saint. I'm still exactly who I was supposed to be, but I'm a better version of what I used to be. So I'll talk to you next time about that. I'd be an angel if I stuck feathers through my skin. And the long and short of it is, I wouldn't know where to begin.